question and answer time. We will also send you a link to this recording over the next few days, as well as upload it to our YouTube channel and post it on our website. The lines will be muted throughout the presentation. Attendees can listen in on this webinar through their computer or by dialing in using the number and meeting ID provided by the Zoom software. If you have any comments or questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can send me the question privately or address the entire group. At the end of the presentation, please use the raised hand feature if you wish to ask a question directly to the presenter versus the chat feature. Please hold on a moment while I start the recording.
We're up and rolling.
Awesome. So with that, I would like to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Ariane Abney, who is the State Director for All Voting is Local, Pennsylvania. He leads an effort to improve election administration across the state that will protect and expand access to the ballot for all voters, working directly with election officials, grassroots advocacy groups, and others. Ariane seeks to remove the systemic barriers that exist for voters. Ariane is a social worker and voting rights advocate that fights to raise the bar of acquired knowledge and close the gap of ignorance. He is a Philadelphia native and currently a Pittsburgh resident. We also have Al-Sharif Nassef, is the Pennsylvania's campaign manager for All Voting is Local, where he works with local coalitions and government stakeholders to protect the right to vote for all Pennsylvanians. With a background in international human rights, peace building, and environmental organizing, Al-Sharif recognizes that voting and local government is the keystone upon which all other civil and human rights can flourish. Al-Sharif is a first-generation American who currently resides in Philadelphia. And with that, gentlemen, I pass it over to you, and we'll be putting myself on mute.
Awesome. Thanks, Gail. Appreciate it. What I'm going to do now before we jump into it, I'm going to try to share my screen. And if you could just let me know, make sure that it works. Let's see. Yes, can everybody see
yeah.
the screen? Let's see.
We see your screen. It's in the editing format. Do you want to go up to the slideshow?
Yeah, I sure do. There we go.
Perfect.
Better?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to just first and foremost thank you all, and especially thank you, Gail, for reaching out to us and allowing us to come in and share in this platform with you all and allow us to join into your space to share some information with you all. I want to just kind of first and foremost sort of level set with you all. We understand that there's just a lot going on in the world today, and we are living in really uncertain times. And this is sort of our new, temporary, and current reality. I want to certainly express my appreciation to the work that you all do around the housing space. I think it is of utmost criticality, especially now, given the situation that people are in. We just saw that the Governor Wolf had put a stay-at-home order for all Pennsylvanians. And so being able to have people who are advocating for them and their housing rights, and to be able to have shelter in these times, the work that you all do is extremely important. And I'm extremely grateful for everything that you all are doing. So I want to kind of get that out the way and just say thank you for your work that you're doing. So we are here today, wanted to talk to you all about voting and elections. We know that voting is essential to moving our democracy forward. And despite everything that's going on in our society right now, We are still making plans and efforts across the state and our state government to make sure that we can hold elections in the primary this summer, as well as in the fall for the general election. And we wanted to be able to share with you some updates and some information about what's going on. And so Al Sharif, again, who was our campaign manager, and myself, we wanted to put together just a high level informational session for you all with some updates to what's happening with this upcoming election. And so I encourage you all, if there is any information that we are sharing with you that you want us to follow up with you on, we're happy to do that. The information that we're going to be sharing is very top line and very high level, sort of a 30,000 foot view of the major changes. There are a lot of, as any legislation goes, there's a lot of details, a lot of nuance to certain things. And if at a later point you want us to go into any of a deeper dive into some of the more specifics, we're happy to do so. So with that, we can just kind of jump into it. The focus of this presentation is empowering our right to vote. And we want to make sure that you guys have all the tools and the resources and the information that you need, not only to empower the constituencies that
that's cool and all, but
and the people that you work with, but also this information, can be helpful for you all as individuals as well. So just to sort of contextualize and frame the presentation, we want to give you some background information about the voting reform work that's been happening in the state. And so it's been a long time coming, and I say that in all seriousness, for voting reform and updates to our election code here in Pennsylvania. And when I say that, I mean, we haven't had some updates to our election code that goes back to 1937. So a lot of the code was very much outdated, and it really needed to be updated. And so we were very fortunate that a lot of organizations were doing some advocacy to push the state legislature and also to push the governor to modernize our election code. It's really to make voting more accessible and expand access to the ballot for all voters. A lot of the reforms that we just recently enacted over the past several months are voting reforms that other states, our contemporaries, have had in place for decades now. And we were just really, really far behind the curve amongst all of the other many of the other states here in the country. And so back in October of 2019, Governor Wolf signed legislation that the House and the Senate passed that made several changes to the election code. The changes are planning to go into effect in this upcoming primary election in 2020. And if you ever see this in the papers or in the news, it's as Act 77, which was the actual act that was put into place. And so since then, we've learned that the biggest challenge that we had at that point was to get this bill passed, and we did. And then it presented new challenges for us to overcome, and that is implementation, right? We know that any type of plan or policy can be great when it's written down on paper, but the actual execution of it and the way that it is carried out and the way that it is implemented is just as critical, and I would argue sometimes more critical than actually what you write down on the piece of paper. And so we've been doing a lot of work trying to educate people about these changes and to push our elections officials both at the county level in the 67 counties, as well as our Department of State, which oversees elections in the state, push them to really make sure that the implementation of Act 77 is done correctly. And so we all know that we were recently hit with COVID-19, and that has made many organizations, many individuals, as well as our local and state governments have to make adjustments and have to react to it. And one of the adjustments that were made around the voting space is many of you are probably aware that the House and Senate passed a bill, I think this will be last week now, and the governor signed it back on Friday, March 27th, to move the primary election date, which was originally set for Tuesday, April 28th. The legislation now has pushed it back to June the 2nd. And this was in direct response to the coronavirus and making sure that county elections officials have the time to prepare for this uncertain issue, and that they are able to efficiently run their elections, and they needed just a little bit more time to figure out what their game plan was going to be. So this bill that was signed last Friday is called Act 12, and it pushed the primary election date back to June 2nd, but it also made some modifications to Act 77, which we'll go over in a little bit more detail now. So just as a level setting again for this toolkit, when Gail reached out to us, she really wanted us to give you all information about sort of what people's rights are when it comes to being able to vote, what the process is to get people registered, and how you all as housing advocates and housing rights folks are able to make sure that you are informing and carrying out best practices to give information to those people that you are serving, as well as information to have for yourselves. And so our hope and our goal for today is that the information that we're providing in this toolkit, which really is designed to empower you all who are on the ground working directly with voters, to make sure that you are giving them proper information, you're giving them the right information, and you can help to spread the word to make sure that they know their rights when it comes to voting, and that they know and are prepared for the upcoming voter experience. Because many folks who have voted in the past prior to 2020, in this upcoming primary, in this upcoming general and beyond, their voting experience is going, all of our voting experiences really are going to look a little bit differently than they have in the past. But what we say is just because it is going to be different doesn't mean that it has to be difficult. And so our purpose is to make sure that we are making this information available and accessible to everyone so that their voting process is as seamless as it possibly can be. So just want to lift up and highlight some of the major changes that we are seeing in the voting rights space right now. One of the biggest ones, obviously, you know, in order for anybody to be able to vote, they first have to get registered. And that's always the first step here. And so there were some major changes that were made to the voter registration process and the deadline. So this act changed the voter registration deadline from 30 days to now 15 days before the election. And so that kind of is a double-edged sword. It's a gift and a curse. On one hand, it is a very positive thing in the sense that it now will allow individuals more time before an election to actually get registered to vote in that upcoming election. And it also allows third-party voter registration groups and organizations that do voter registration drives. It gives them a little bit more, 15 extra days to get more people registered to vote, which obviously is a great thing because you have more people who can be participatory in the process, in our democracy. But on the other hand, one of the challenges that we're seeing, back to my previous comment about implementation, is that it now puts a little bit more of a strain on the system to process applications, right? So while it gives people more time to get registered, it also minimizes by 15 days the amount of time a county elections office has to process applications. And so one of the things that we are strongly encouraging individuals who want to get registered or entities who want to help people get registered is not to wait until the last minute to the deadline to actually get registered. The sooner that you can get registered, the less stress that it puts on the system to process those applications. Because the last thing that we want to see, and we've seen this in the past, even with the previous 30-day registration deadline, we've seen many counties struggle to be able to process those registrations within 30 days to ensure that everybody who met that 30-day requirement actually gets to vote in that upcoming election. So now that they have less time, it puts more strain on that system. And so we want to give you some information about the new deadlines for the upcoming primary election. Again, as I mentioned, it has been changed to Tuesday, June the 2nd, which then means that the deadline, which anybody who wants to vote in the June the 2nd primary election, they have to be registered by May 18th of 2020. That is the last day that they can get registered. Again, we encourage you to do that way in advance before May 18th.
And so I just want to chime in real quick, because I've done a lot of voter registration on the ground and, talking to people, encouraging people to register. And I know that when people who are doing voter registration, we tend to get like a huge stack of voter registration forms. And then, and then kind of in our mind, we think, well, the deadline isn't until, a month from now or 2 months from now. So I'm going to just hold on to all these registration forms and go drop them all in at once. And I think what Ariane is talking about as far as the strains on the system is that when they get millions or thousands of registration forms in that 15-day period, that's when it puts a strain on the system. And so we really want to encourage people who are registering voters to not deliver all those registration forms in as a bulk, but kind of, segment it out. Once you get maybe it's weekly where you go drop them off, or mail them in on a regular basis rather than compiling them all and delivering it right before the deadline.
Yep, and that is to no fault of any person who's trying to get registered. The deadline is there for a reason, and so, but we've just seen cases where somebody does everything that they're supposed to do correctly. They do get registered, they meet the deadline, but the system is just challenged to process them, and so that person fills out the application, they think they get registered, they show up 15 days later to the polling location thinking they're able to vote, and they're not on the rolls and they're not able to vote. We want to prevent that as much as we possibly can. So early and often. And then Gail also wanted me to kind of lift up some information and rights for people who are experiencing homelessness. They are able and eligible to be registered to vote. And certainly you all understand the definition of homelessness probably better than we do in this voting rights space. But certainly this means not just somebody who doesn't necessarily have a roof over their head or shelter, but it can also be the people who are, living with friends or constantly moving and not having a permanent place to stay, or somebody who may be living in a shelter. As long as they are 18 years of age by the next upcoming election, they're a U.S. citizen for 30 days, and they are a Pennsylvania resident for 30 days, they are able to get registered to vote. And so someone who may not have that permanent address right now when they get registered, they are able to use their last known address where they were at. Also, they're able to use a location where they spend the majority of their time. And then in terms of voter registration and who can help somebody, who can assist somebody in getting registered to vote, in Pennsylvania, unlike other states, in Pennsylvania, there are no restrictions on who can assist somebody with filling out or completing a voter registration form, whether that be an individual person or that be an entity, an institution, or an organization. There are no restrictions on that. The only requirement that would be put on that person is when they fill out their application and they have somebody assist them, there is a section at the end of the form that says, did somebody help you complete this registration form? And the person that helped them has to put their name and their address just for verification. So any organization, if you want to be a third-party voter registration organization and do drives, you do not have to register as an organization to do that. You can just go ahead and have people complete the form. So wanted to share with you just some information on the different ways that people can register to vote and or update their voter registration. Again, for those people who may already be registered, but they are more transient and they are moving, and sometimes you move to a new location and you forget to update your information, you can both update your information and register to vote for the first time at the same place. they can do that online at votespa.com, as well as that votespa.com has a lot more information about the entire voting experience. They can also print out a paper application form, fill it out by hand, and then mail it to their county board of elections. They can also go in person to their county board of elections office and request a voter registration form and fill it out on the spot. Or they can go to their PennDOT driver's license center when they're updating their driver's license or their state ID. They can also register to vote there. And there are several other government agencies that also will allow you to register to vote on the spot.
Just to chime in again, I think logistically, my experience has been that when people do the process online, for those who have access to a computer and who have access to internet, it's much less likely to make a mistake, and it's less likely for that registration application to be rejected by the county when it's done online, because basically to submit it, you have to fill out all the essential parts of the registration form. So when people fill it out by hand, maybe they miss like an essential, one of the essential parts of it, and when it ends up getting to the county, they reject the application. I think when you do it online, you're just much more likely to have your voter application accepted. And so really want to encourage people to do it online when possible.
That's a great point. Thanks for flagging that, Al-Sharif. And then, so just kind of moving on, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Another major change is that the option to vote by mail for people. Historically, before this law was passed, the only way that people were able to not vote in person and kind of vote by mail is through an absentee ballot. But with that, previously you needed to have a reason or an excuse for why you were not able to vote in person. Say you were in a hospital or you were going to be out of the area for work. Now with this new law, it removes those reasonings for why somebody wants to vote by mail, and anybody that is registered and eligible and registered to vote in Pennsylvania has the option to vote by mail without an excuse. And so that's a great major win, because it expands access to the ballot. We know that in the 21st century, people have very, very active lifestyles, and they may not always be able to stand and wait in line for an hour or potentially 2 hours if there's a long line, because they have to get to work or they have to send their kids to school. And so now they have this new option where they can actually vote by mail. And so here's just some information on how they can actually vote by mail. You'll see here, there's a link to complete your vote by mail ballot application. The first step to actually get your ballot sent to you is you have to fill out a one-page form, which is very similar to the voter registration form. They ask for your basic information, but it is their way to verify that you are registered to vote and you are who you say you are, so they can actually send you the correct ballot for you to vote on. So you can complete the application form either online, and you can use that link to find that form online, or you can print out a mail-in ballot request application, a paper application, and you can fill it out by hand and mail it into your county board of elections office. Or you can go in person, once again, to your county elections office and request a ballot application in person. You'll see also links here for all of the county elections offices information for all 67 counties in the state of Pennsylvania. So no matter where you are in the state, or no matter where your constituents are in the state, they will have access to both the address where the county elections office is, as well as a phone number to call them if you have any subsequent follow-up questions. And then there are deadlines for which someone can submit their ballot application form, and deadlines for which someone can actually submit their ballot. So we want to make sure that people are aware of these deadlines, because if you miss these deadlines, it's going to impact that person or your ability to be able to vote in the upcoming primary election. And so the deadline for the primary election to submit an application for a mail-in ballot is Tuesday, May 26th. So that is essentially, it's 1 week. It's the Tuesday before the actual June 2nd primary election. If you or one of your constituencies wants to vote by mail, they have to have that application in to the county elections office no later than Tuesday, May the 26th. And then once you submit your ballot application, you get verified by the county elections office that you are a registered voter. They will then mail you back out your actual ballot for you to complete. In that envelope that you will receive with your ballot, you will also get instructions on how to actually complete the ballot the correct way, and all of the bubbles that you need to fill in, where to sign it and where to date it, and where to mail your application back in. And so the deadline to return your actual completed ballot, it must be received by 8 p.m. on election day to your county elections office. It can be either hand delivered, you can physically go in person and drop it off, or you can put it back in the mail. When you receive your ballot to complete with the instructions, you will have prepaid postage in it, so you don't have to pay for a stamp. But if you are submitting your ballot application by paper form and you're mailing it in, you will have to put a stamp on that, but your actual ballot will be prepaid. Now, this is a major thing I want to highlight. If you are planning to mail your ballot back in, it has to physically be in the office by 8 p.m. in the elections office, even if it is postmarked prior to Tuesday, June the 2nd. If it does not physically get into the office by 8 p.m. on June the 2nd, legally, the County Board of Elections does not have to accept it by law. So we are encouraging you, again, to be proactive and to mail it in. If you choose to mail it in early, and make sure that you have the option to call your County Board of Elections to confirm that it actually was received. So another major change, I'm sure many of you may have seen this. The governor last year put out a mandate that all 67 counties in Pennsylvania need to update their voting systems and their voting equipment to have a voter verifiable paper trail. So many of you may have in the past remember doing these touchscreen machines, sort of electronic machines that will record your vote and your ballot. What we are moving to now is people will have like physical paper ballots, almost like I don't know if I'm showing my age, but I remember being in school and having the Scantron tests and filling out the bubbles. It's going to be similar to that. And so this was done for security reasons and for reasons if there is at the end of the election a need for a recall or a recount of the votes, they can, instead of looking at a machine, they can go back and physically take out every piece of paper which somebody cast their ballot, and they can count them by hand. It's a much more secure process. And so every county, though, all 67 counties, their voting system and equipment is going to look a little bit different. So it's hard for me to say what everybody's voter experience is going to be on election day in person, because it's not universal for everyone. But for the most part, people will be voting on a paper ballot, and they will be taking their paper ballot that they vote behind a privacy screen and feeding it into a scanner that will then tabulate their vote. So for more information about which voting system each county is using, so you can give that information to your constituencies or for your own benefit, we provided a link in here where you can get more information about what that system looks like, what the process is. And for most counties on that list, they actually have a video tutorial about the step-by-step process that somebody will take to actually vote from when they enter the booth to when they exit the polling location. So another major change that we're seeing right now is, again, in response to the coronavirus, which is one of the reasons why the primary election was moved back. Because of social distancing, there were a lot of concerns about what happens at polling locations where, people are unable to, or really challenged when it comes to being able to social distance, because they have to stand in long lines and wait for, you know, a certain amount of times to actually get into the polling location. And what happens to our poll workers, right? Our poll workers who are our front lines elections administration workers, who are the people that you see when you enter into the poll, who sign you in to make sure that you are who you are and set you up with the ability to vote. We were seeing in other states that many of the people who were poll workers were, because they're volunteers, they were calling off and saying, hey, they were too concerned about being a poll worker amidst coronavirus, that they decided that they didn't want to work. And that puts a lot of strain on an election, because you could imagine what would happen if you showed up to your polling location and there were no poll workers to open up the polls or to help you actually go ahead and vote. And so there are a lot of conversations and questions around how do we still have safe and secure and healthy in-person voting options for those people who don't want to vote by mail. And so the governor and the Secretary of State and voting rights advocates are constantly working around the clock to figure out how we ensure that those people who still want to show up in person to vote have that option, and it is safe and it is secure, and they will be healthy. And so one of the things that the legislature decided is giving counties the ability to consolidate polling locations. So that means that if there are two polling locations that are in similar sort of confines or similar, a reasonable distance from each other, that they will try to consolidate them so that they don't have to have poll workers at both locations. It allows them to have less poll workers at one single location. And so counties will be, over the next several weeks, making changes to their polling locations. But the requirement in the law says that counties cannot make changes to any polling locations less than 20 days before the election, because there needs to be a time between when that polling location is changed and when the county elections office has to notify voters in that area that their polling location has changed. And so this is really critical because one of the concerns is the last thing that we want to have on election day is confusion, right? Because confusion can lead to people being discouraged and people deciding that, hey, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where my polling place is. I'm going to choose not to vote. And we want to do everything that we can to ensure that people actually exercise their right to vote. And so we are monitoring these polling location changes. And as they do happen, we are trying to update and inform those voters in those areas so that they know on election day where they need to go so that they don't show up at the wrong place. And so we are strongly encouraging all voters and yourselves to share with your constituencies to make sure that they double check their polling location for any last minute changes. Now, you can check your polling location now. It's unlikely that it has changed this far out before the election, but we are encouraging you, if you do plan on voting in person on election day, to look at this link and to check your polling location either the day of the election before you actually physically go out and vote, or the day or the weekend before the election, just to make sure that your polling location hasn't changed. And if it does change, the information should be on this site so you know where you need to go. And so just a few more slides before we open it up to questions, comments, and concerns. Just some general sort of rules of thumb on why all of this matters. This matters because, you know, we as an organization, one of our core focuses is trying to, you know, dismantle any of the barriers that exist for people to be able to vote. You know, we hear oftentimes that, you know, from people who aren't necessarily having the same experiences as the people that we deal with, we hear people wrongfully say that voting is easy for everybody. But we know that it is not necessarily the case that voting is easy for everybody, and there are systemic barriers that exist. And so we want to minimize and break down those barriers, and we want to expand access to the ballot for everyone. And so these new laws and these new regulations are a good first step to expand access, give people more options on how they can be able to vote. But as I said in the beginning, you know, the devil is in the details, and the way that it is implemented is key, as well as making sure that we're holding our elections officials, both at the state level and the county level, accountable to make sure that they are following the law the way that it is supposed to be done. And then again, it's important that we minimize confusion. We want to make sure that as these changes are happening sort of on a daily basis because of Corona, and sometimes on an hourly basis, that we are updating our constituencies about this information so that the casual everyday voter who just wants to go out and exercise their right to vote, that we minimize their confusion on election day or prior to election day. And then this is also important because voter education is really important, especially with all of these new changes. As I said, people's voting experience is going to be a lot different than it was the last time that they voted in 2019 and 2018, but it doesn't have to be difficult. And so a really key part of this is making sure that we are educating voters about this new experience and making sure that they know their rights. And then just some quick information on how you all can be helpful in this process. I really see you all as advocates. And so voter education to your constituencies and sharing this information with the people that you serve is going to be very critical, and sort of spreading the word and the proper information to make sure that they are prepared for the upcoming election. And if you all are interested in doing voter registration, or helping people complete their voter registration form, or helping people complete their vote by mail ballot application, we want to make sure that you all know kind of what the rules and the deadlines and the norms are around this, so that you have the proper tools and information to actually do that for the people that you serve. You can also help by reaching out and calling your county, your local county board of elections office. Like we said, we provided the link for all 67 counties, so you have their phone number to reach out to them, to ask them questions about, hey, we want to register people in our housing residencies. We want to get them registered to vote. Can you County Board of Elections provide us with some paper registration forms? Or can you provide us with some vote by mail ballot application forms that we can give to people to help them fill out the application? And just sort of build relationships with your County Board of Elections to let them know, hey, we're doing these activities, just want you to know and be aware of that, so that when we come to drop off these applications, or we are encouraging people to vote by mail, that you are aware of that, and sort of build good relationships and partnerships, and to see kind of what their needs are, to see what their capacity is, as Al Sharif mentioned, to see what strains will be put on their offices to be able to process voter registration forms if you drop off a stack of voter registration forms at the last minute. And then one other thing that we are really trying to do as an organization is sort of tell stories, like to share stories, to sort of bring awareness to these issues about voting rights and why it's so critical. And so we are asking you all if you have any individual experiences or sort of challenges that you have experienced in your individual ability to exercise your right to vote, either to get registered or actually go in to cast your vote. We want you to share that story so that we can, lift up that there are barriers that still exist to voting. And we're working as an organization to break down those barriers. And two, if you have any people that you have worked with in your constituencies that that are transient populations, or that are, just moving a lot or experiencing homelessness, that also at the same time have had difficulties when they've been trying to register to vote or go and exercise their right to vote, and that they may be willing to share their story with us, so that we can lift up the experiences of real people who are still dealing with challenges when their ability to be able to vote. We encourage you to share that information with us so that we can figure out how we can break down that barrier and make their ability to participate in our democracy a little bit easier for them and for others like them. And so with that, we will just kind of pause there and again say thank you for this opportunity to share this information with you. Thank you for, again, the work that you all are doing and the criticality of that. We will provide here information about our organization. Our website is here. We are on the different social media platforms, so please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as you see information that we're putting out there in our social media, please, we encourage you to share that. Also provided my and Al Sharif's email address. So if you do have any follow-up questions, comments, or concerns that you aren't able to ask on this webinar, I encourage you, feel free to reach out and shoot us an email. We're happy to provide any information that we possibly can. And so with that, I think I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can maybe see.
No, leave your information up.
Oh, okay, awesome, perfect.
Yeah, I think it's great to leave that information up. I want to thank you for that really, really thorough and great presentation. We do have a few questions from folks. We have had like 75 people hang through to the end here, which I think is fantastic.
Awesome.
I think it really speaks to how valuable this presentation has been. So the first question is from Samantha, and it is, for folks who are experiencing homelessness, they can use their last known address, which is great, but are there requirements to prove that address? What if they don't have mail, photo ID, etc.?
Yeah, so one of the things that you would need to do, and this is something that counties, it kind of varies sometimes from county to county. When you are registering, you would, if you don't have an ID or you don't have a driver's license or a state ID number to put in there, you can put the last four of your social security number to verify that you are, basically they want to verify that you are a US citizen, right? They want to verify you're a citizen. So you can put the last four of your social to register, and you can, if you're doing it online, you can also take a photo of your signature, because if you don't have a driver's license or a state ID, you wouldn't have a signature on file for them to match with. But in the application form, you can complete the application and then they will mail you a signature card, and you can fill that out and send that back into them for them to have your signature on file. So you'll need that again. So when you actually go to vote in person, if anybody has experienced this, the poll worker will ask you, hey, are you Gail Schwartz, right? You say yes, and then you have to just sign in to verify, and they make sure that signature matches what they have on file. The same thing if you apply for a vote by mail application form, you will have to sign it, and they use that signature to try to match it up with what they have on file. But when you do go to vote in person for the first time, there are different ID sort of requirements for first-time voters at a new polling location. So if you don't have a state ID, you can use a military ID, you can use a passport, you can use a bank statement, most recent, and I'm going off the top of my head, but you can use, if you have utility bills for that address that are in your name, you can use that. And again, on the Votes PA link that we provided, it will tell you all of the list of different materials and IDs that you can use to actually, verify that you are who you are. And then if you don't have all those, you are able to bring somebody with you that can attest and be a witness to say, I can verify that this is Gail Schwartz, and they would have to sign an affidavit if that's like the last case scenario, you don't have anything. So there are options, and every county does it. Some poll workers, they are a little bit more stringent about that, and then some poll workers are, hey, if you are who you are, we will make sure that you can go ahead and be able to vote.
I did also want to put out a resource. There is an organization called Vote Riders, which will provide sort of free expert assistance to help anyone get a voter ID. And they'll even pay for the cost of getting a given individual to the ID issuing office, and they'll kind of walk them through the steps. So, I mean, I think it, especially for people who are transient and, you know, when it comes to applying for other benefits, it's probably a good idea to have some sort of ID. And there is an organization that'll kind of, you know, help walk them through the process and actually sort of invest those resources into helping vulnerable communities get IDs. So I'll put the, and it's voteriders.org. And I'll put the link into the chat here. There's a hotline that you can call. There's also a Pennsylvania coordinator for vote riders who, you know, who's an attorney and does like pro bono stuff to like help with the logistical process of getting people IDs if they need. And they'll also take care of the finances. So I'll just make sure everyone is aware of the resource.
We can include that information when we send out the follow-up materials with the copy of this presentation and the link for this recording. So with that, I want to get on to the next question. If I assist a participant in my nonprofit's program complete their registration application, do I sign with my home address or with my employer's address?
Yeah, so you would sign with your home address because it still is you as that individual, right? Because you could be working at that, you know, job one day and then the next day you may not be, right? So it is that your home address. So it's more as the individual versus the organization is getting that person registered.
Great. What is the rule for convicted felons' ability to vote, including convictions in other states?
That's a great question. So I cannot speak to all other states because every state is a little bit different when it comes to felony and enfranchisement, and those who are currently in jail and those who have a record. But for Pennsylvania, the law, and Pennsylvania is actually a little bit more progressive than some other states on this issue. So as long as you are not currently in jail serving for a felony conviction, you have the right to register to vote and you have the right to vote in the election. So if you are currently in jail serving a misdemeanor or several misdemeanors, you are still eligible to register and to vote, as well as if you are a pretrial detainee. Even if you are on pretrial detainee for a felony, you still have the right to register and to vote. It is that point once you actually officially get convicted and you're in jail serving your time is when you aren't able to vote. But once you serve your time, if you have a felony conviction, once you are released, you then have the right to vote. So people who are released from jail that have a felony on their record are able to register and to vote. And those people who are in like transitional housing places after they're leaving jail, they have the right to vote as well. That's a great question.
Excellent. All right, is there any other questions that I missed in our chat box? On the voter registration application, it still has the old April primary date and deadline.
Yep.
Will that information be changed soon to reflect the new information?
Yes, we have put some heat on the Department of State for the fact that they have not updated that yet. I mean, now things are so fluid and they've got a lot of updating on their website and things of that nature to do. That is something that we've been urging them to make sure that they do that. Like it has to be done ASAP. And so they've given us the message that they are working on it. They're getting it updated. They haven't necessarily committed to a date, but we will continue to put pressure on them to make sure they update that and other information that's on their website as well. So it will be updated as soon as it possibly can. But that's the Department of State that we are trying to get them to get on it.
Okay, we got a couple more questions popped up.
Great.
This one's from Ali. Are there still closed primaries?
Yes. So Pennsylvania still has closed primaries, which means someone who is not who is not affiliated with a specific party, as an independent, is not able to vote in the primary, but they can vote in the general election. I also wanted to mention that this is something that the legislator has kind of had multiple conversations around. And so if there are any changes to that, sometimes it becomes politically not feasible, given the way that our legislator is set up for them to kind of take on that challenge or that issue. But there have at least been new conversations in the legislature about what does it look like to have semi-open primaries, if not fully open primaries. If that changes, we will be sure to make sure that we update you. Also, in this bill, they did eliminate straight party ticket voting. So just want to make sure, we didn't put this in the slide, but this is one of the other sort of deeper dive nuances about this new bill. So for those who may have gone in the past and they either go in and just check the top that says vote all Democrat, as opposed to going down Democrat or Republican, as opposed to going down for each actual race, that option is now removed for you. And so you can't just check all D or all R and it just checks everybody on that side. You have to go down ballot for each person and each race to actually vote for somebody. So that option has now been removed. Just want to give you the heads up on that.
All right, and our last question is, what about Megan law offenders? I guess just some clarification to make sure that those folks on their voting rights.
Are they able to vote? Yes.
Yeah.
They're able to register and be voted. Yep.
All right, and then it looks like we have one last comment from Ali, who shared that closed primaries by default disenfranchise people from voting.
Point well taken.
Yeah. All right. So with all of those questions, I want to again thank Ariane and Al Sharif for this really, really important and thorough presentation. I know some of the key takeaways for me is that, of course, the primary has been moved to June 2nd. For those of you who may have been holding that date for another event, that was what the Housing Alliance had proposed to be our annual Home Matters Day, Lobby Day in Harrisburg. We will be postponing that event. We do not have the new date set, but clearly we want all folks who are able to be at home and voting in their home communities. So again, thanks for everybody's interest on that. And as soon as we have those key updates, we'll be sure to share among the membership. But again, the primary has been moved to Tuesday, June 2nd. The cutoff to register is May 18th. For those who need to register just for themselves or are part of a registration drive, we ask that you get those forms in as soon as possible so that there isn't an overwhelming amount after the deadline, so that all of those applications can be processed. Forms that are done electronically have a greater likelihood of being accepted versus the hand filled out forms. If you want to vote with the mail-in option, that deadline is May 26th. With the change in the primary, polls will be consolidating, and that information by law has to be shared with voters 2 weeks before the primary. And we will be sharing information about votewriters.org to help folks not only register to vote, but be able to vote in the instance that they don't have a standard state issue ID. Is there anything else that we want to make sure people walk away with today?
There was one in our comments reference to if you vote by mail, there's a difference this time when you can't change your vote. Ariane, do you see that in the comments? Are you able to address that?
I can't see I still see my presentation up, but
go ahead and unshare so we can, okay. It's a rather thorough comment, so.
Could you read it?
Sure.
Okay, yeah.
It says, can you address one distinct point about the vote by mail option, which is that when once your completed ballot is received at your county office, you're stuck with whatever your vote was when you completed the ballot. In the old system, you could change your vote. Is a shortened version of what the person wrote.
I don't know about changing your vote in the past or the old system, but yes, if you vote by mail and you complete the form and you mail it back in or you hand deliver it to the County Board of Elections before the election day, yes, that is you casting your ballot on that date, right? So you can begin applying for a vote by mail ballot now, and they can send it to you, and you can vote. If you get it in the mail next week or the week after that, but once you do that, yes, your vote is cast. Now you do have the option if you apply for a vote by mail ballot and they send it to you and you don't cast it and you decide, hey, I changed my mind, I no longer want to vote by mail, I feel a little bit more comfortable with Corona, that I can go in person, and now it's June 2nd, I want to go to my polling place and vote. You are able to do that in person, but you have to, for this upcoming primary, you will have to vote a provisional ballot as opposed to a regular ballot. And essentially a provisional ballot is a ballot where you still cast your votes, but it is recorded at that moment, but it is not counted until later in the evening when that ballot gets sent to the County Board of Elections office. And essentially the reason why they do that is they need to verify that the person who filled out that provisional ballot, because they got sent a physical ballot in the mail, they need to make sure that they didn't receive that physical ballot at the County Board of Elections already, so that somebody didn't accidentally vote twice. And so once they verify that provisional ballot was completed correctly, they look to make sure that they didn't receive the first ballot in the mail that was voted. If they see that it wasn't done, then they will count that provisional ballot. So I don't know if that kind of was what they were saying in terms of being able to change your vote, but if you cast your ballot via vote by mail and you send it in or you physically put it in, that is you casting your ballot, yes.
Thank you so much.
I want to make also just a quick point. I think this was in the most recent updates to the law that took place last Friday. But basically, because if you requested a mail-in ballot, how it was under the initial act was that you basically can't vote on election day except by provisional ballot. But I think if you get your mail-in ballot and then for some reason you still want to go in on election day and vote, if you bring that ballot with you to the polling place, and they void it on the spot and you put your signature on that your ballot is voided, they kind of do that verification process on the spot. So say you apply for a mail-in ballot, you get it in the mail. If you don't want, and if you still want to go to your polling location, you just got to take your mail-in ballot with you and void it, and then you can cast a normal ballot rather than a provisional ballot on it.
So yes, to an extent. So that is going to take in effect starting November, starting in the general election. So what Al Sharif is referencing is a little bit different from what I said. What I said will only be for the primary election, and then it changes to what Al Sharif said for the general election. So for the primary election, if you request a vote by mail ballot and you receive it and you change your mind, you want to vote in person on June 2nd, you still will have to vote a provisional ballot no matter what. Now, for the general election in November, if you get your ballot in the mail and you change your mind and you want to vote in person, you can then bring in your ballot and they will spoil it which basically is they will void it and you sign an affidavit saying that you did not vote on that physical form. And then you can vote a traditional regular ballot and you don't have to vote provisional. So it's just a little bit of a distinction. They weren't able to get that in for this upcoming primary, but that will start in November and all subsequent elections after November.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to thank everybody so much for getting on today's webinar. Hopefully you will be able to join us for next week's webinar on tenant selection and criminal history 101. And with that, I want to thank again our presenters today, and everyone have a beautiful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, all.
Bye.